then to let you know that what we are focusing on today, excuse me, that shouldn't have happened. What we are focusing on today is the evolution of a theory. And so I'm hoping that it will stimulate your thought processes as you're looking at the data that you're collecting, and I hope it gives you some ways to think through what you could be focused on. So I thought we were going to have a small group, so I had a place here for introductions. But of course, there's so many of you. If you introduce yourself in the chat to the extent that I could see that, I would love to see where you are and what you're doing. We're going to, I'm going to kind of take you through a lecture on crime and place, talk to you about some of the theories that are out there regarding that, and use that as a jumping off point for a case study that we're going to look at. And after we look at the case study, there's going to be some questions that I pose, and I'm hoping that those questions will stimulate your thought in terms of how you're going to look at the data that you've collected. And maybe there's some other questions that you may be asking yourself or looking into your community to see, to bring those things together. Because this lecture is really in aid of stimulating you to really think about what is the data that you're looking at and how and why is it important. So I'm going to move this over here, down here. So what do we already know about crime theories and location, place, gender, or space? Much of the crime theories focus on offender behavior and the choices offenders make about the crimes they commit. And the notion of place provides a discrete measurement to point to explore the intersections of crime targets, places, and frequency measurements. And you'll see that in some of the crime theories that we're going to be discussing. And so I'm going to just go ahead and pinpoint that the notion of place is embedded in the Safe City app because that's location. And so when I talk about place, I'm really talking about a discrete location. And so the other thing is that recent studies have shown that place characteristics, especially the frequency of gender-related victimization, provides a more granular understanding of place. And that is to say that we're starting to look at place as one of the issues to be focused on and not just offender behavior. And then there's this notion of space that I'm going to throw out to you, because space is really a collection of places, which provides a more inclusive representation of space. And what I mean by that is if you're talking about the location of a particular incident, the space around it, we often don't look at the space around it in ways that help us understand what's happening. So let's talk about the main theories of crime. There are several theories of crime that are really focused on, I'll say, place-related issues. There's social theories and there's offender theories. If you look at some of these theories, the titles of some of these theories, you may be familiar with some of them. And then there has been recently, because of the advent of GIS and location analysis, there have been theories of crime pattern analysis, temporal pattern analysis, spatial, hotspot detection. You probably have heard a lot about that, and then criminal network analysis. So let's talk about some of those theories. So one of the main theories that has been in the criminology space is social disorganization theory. And this theory states that crime occurs in communities when there's an inability of the community structures to realize the common values of the residents and then maintain social control. And so if the community itself cannot manage its common values in a way that provides control in the community, then this theory postulates that that's when crime occurs. And so these measurements are out there, ability to supervise, the extensions of local friendship networks, weak community organizations, low socioeconomic status, levels of residential mobility that impact stability. There's lots and lots of factors in social disorganization theory. And this theory has been around a long time. And so a lot of times this theory has been used in lower income communities to talk about why crime occurs in those communities. One of the interesting thing I'm pointing out is offenders are exposed to the same structural and community influence and poverty. And so some theorists are believing that because of that, that has increased the incidence of interpersonal violence, and that's domestic violence. And so this theory is something that's being used to talk about what are the reasons for crime in a particular community. So then there's this other theory, routine activities theory, which is what we're probably going to be talking a lot more about. It states that offenders commit crimes within their activity or awareness space. And that awareness space includes visit to activity nodes, and those nodes are like going to the grocery store or going to school or wherever, places that they normally go. So it's their routine activity. I get up in the morning, I go here, I go there. And when people are thinking about committing a crime, they're thinking about committing a crime within this activity or awareness spaces. People don't normally go outside those spaces to commit crimes. And we're talking about in general. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but in general, what scientists have found is that people commit crime within their activity or awareness space. And also they're looking for particular targets or flows of people to increase that opportunity. So it's not just the grocery store, but is it a store where people are always going in and out and nobody is going to really be paying attention to you if you decide you're going to commit a crime? And so that's really routine activities theory. Then there's crime pattern theory. This is another old theory that is actually continuing to be used, and it says that crime occurs at the intersection between the offender's awareness space and the spatial distribution of suitable targets. So we're talking again about that awareness space, but now it's actually focusing on where the targets are. There have been studies that talked about that people commit crimes, neighborhood crimes within, a 1 or 2 block radius of their own home, which is amazing to me that people would commit crimes in that awareness space and not believe that somebody wouldn't find them out because it's near their own home. And so they're also looking at where the targets are and how those targets are spatially distributed. The other thing is that the studies show that these offenders, or some offenders, calculate the time to offend. They're actually asking themselves, how long is it going to take me to get this done? And if it's 20 minutes, how do I do that? It talks about that from the frequency of their visits to the crime location and then back to safety. And so these are other theories that look at the movement of the target and then the offender's awareness of that. And so the literature has expanded a bit to talk about place as a unit of analysis. And Vania Seato has done a lot of work in this area. And one of the studies that she recently did, her and her colleagues talked about the ecology of outdoor rape, finding that factors of opportunity, accessibility, and anonymity are important to different degrees in explaining the geography of rape. So where does rape occur? How does it occur? Actually, now we're looking at place and space as a way to understand how that happens. And very interesting study. I suggest that you grab a look at that. And I'm sorry, I didn't put together a list of my references, but I will do that and send that on to you so that you can have that if you want to look up some of these studies. But it's interesting that opportunity, accessibility, and anonymity are important to different degrees, meaning that sometimes accessibility is more important. Sometimes anonymity is more important. And it's interesting because a lot of the statistics show that women are assaulted or raped or sexually harassed by people that they know. So anonymity may not be a factor in a lot of times in terms of what happens, but it is a factor and it may be important in different degrees. The other study that was done talks about women's fear of crime, and that fear of crime is gendered. And now we're starting to talk about the notion of how gender fits into some of the crime theories. And this study found that that the fear of crime is gendered when it's modeled with neighborhood and space. And even though the results were mixed, it is an important beginning about the evolution of how space is understood and how the notion of gender is embedded in that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So now there are some other studies that are beginning to emerge about, I'm calling GIS-based place, and I'm saying that it as space. And I'll talk about the notions coming together. But global information satellites are now providing us all of this information about location. And we're seeing it everywhere. And now the theorists in criminology are beginning to talk about that and utilize that. So there was Brahm did a cross-jurisdictional analysis of place, finding that certain dynamics across jurisdictions were not able to determine place versus crime, but that spatial arrangements reveal how this information impacts crime. And that is to say that it's not just the place, but it's the spatial arrangement that begins to impact crime. Another study said that crime increased with the frequency to the offender's activity nodes in their awareness space. And we talked a bit about that earlier. The crime occurred near their activity nodes, and node type increased the joint effect of crime incidents, which means that based upon where they were going, there was an increased effect of the incidence of crime. And so an example of that would be somebody going to the liquor store on a daily basis to pick up a beer or something like that. That particular, the joint effect of their going there all the time for that particular activity, because they got drunk or because they were feeling less inhibited, those kinds of things affect crime as well. Kadar's study talked about mobility flows. And I think this is an interesting discussion about going into your neighborhood and going out in the neighborhood. And he was doing that to understand the relative importance of routine. And I'm just going to move this up. Routine and activity nodes and pathways as separate but connected elements of awareness space. That is to say that going in and out of particular places can let scientists understand the importance of certain nodes. And so it's not just the node itself, but it's the mobility around it that becomes important. And so now talking about gender dimensions of space, Cy-Watch's study talked about gendered space as reflecting spatial underpinnings of gender roles and determined personal mobility. And looking at that to understand whether a person is permitted to access a particular space. There have been a lot of studies that talk about gender roles and where women are permitted to be. And in the United States, we would think that that's probably not as true as it is in other places where the society is more patriarchal. But there are even places where you would imagine that women can go anywhere and be anywhere. There are gendered spaces, and now it's begun to be studied more clearly to determine whether this place is someplace that women are permitted to be. So, for example, the grocery store here in the United States, the grocery store is a place where women are permitted to be because we're supposed to go and get the food for our families and things like that. That might be considered a gendered space. And in that space, can people take advantage of women because they're always going in and out of that space? As we'll see in other countries, women that don't have access, well, I shouldn't say in other countries, everywhere, when women don't have access to private vehicles, those spaces become gendered because if they're leaving their homes, they're going to have to go to these different spaces in order to access transportation. And so that's another area where we're talking about, is this a space where a person is permitted to access? Are there spaces where women and girls are not permitted to access? And what is the impact in those spaces? So Savard and Kelly's study talked about that gendered spaces are those where there's only primarily one gender there. The atmosphere reflects gender interests and perspective, and behavior is shaped by traditional views. That may be breaking down, but what we're seeing in terms of what we're seeing through study is that it's begun to be relatively stable, that there are places that basically mostly are frequented by one gender. And what their study found that females are more likely to be victimized in these spaces. And so the research is beginning to look at the fact that these spaces are there and the fact that females are more likely to be victimized in these spaces. And so the next notion, and I think this is important in terms of your study going forward, is the notion of guardians. Because guardians are starting to become a part of the analysis because they interact to interrupt crime. They have to be present, and they have to have the capacity and willingness to intervene. And these guardians, as we'll see, are a little different than bystanders. Bystanders don't have an obligation to do anything. Bystanders decide to do something based upon their own personal perspective and what they believe is right. And so, different from bystanders who have been a part of a lot of analysis, guardians are starting to be looked at as they have some obligation to interrupt or prevent crime. They first must be present, excuse me. And a lot of times, there's this saying that, where's a police person when you need them? A lot of times guardians are not present. And if there is a guardian present, they may or may not have the capacity or willingness to intervene. So that becomes an important thing about guardians. And so Salimowski's study noted that active guardianship has not been studied outside the home, but they used this app called Fix My Street to measure guardianship through individual reporting of street issues. And I thought this was really interesting because of its similar reporting, like the Safe City app that you guys are using. And they found different types of guardianship behavior in this study. And I think it is something that we ought to begin to study more. Guardians are also what is called place managers. place managers are people that are there to manage the place, but they're not necessarily there to prevent crime. And so the question becomes, what is the role of a place manager in terms of preventing crime, and has society really looked at that as an opportunity to help that in these different settings? And so now I want to just kind of jump toward Safe City, because I wanted to just throw this notion out to you that guardianship, that Safe Cities apps, the impacts may act as a guardian, or may some of the benefits of using the platform are guardian in nature. And so the study that my colleague Suzanne Lee and Mrs. Silva examined 137 accounts collected by Safe City. And what they found was that these accounts, women were on buses during these accounts. And what did women do during those situations? They found that keeping silent, 27 kept silent, 37 fled, and these actions by women, a lot of them had the influence of bystanders in terms of what worked well. Some of them that fled or resisted or cried out or made a scene or engaged the crowd, those worked well in closed shared spaces of a crowded public bus. And those are strategies that women have used. But we're looking now at, what about the bus? What about the bus driver? What about some of these place-related issues that we can focus on now to make sure that it's not just the woman's safety strategy that begins to impact offender behavior, but that there might be some other aspects that might be important in that. And so just like the Fix My Street app, Safe City exhibits these guardianship properties. Women report the place, but their contextual stories really gives an idea of why the place itself is the issue. It's not just the location, it is the space around it and the attributes around that Safe City is actually capturing. So when you're looking at the data that you're capturing around the areas that you are studying, it's important for you to look at the context that these spaces sit in and ask questions about the context around that. Where are these things happening? It's, yeah, time of day is important. Yeah, the place is important. But what are the things that are surrounding that you see in those contextual stories that provide an understanding of space? What does the space look like? What are the attributes of that space that become a part of how you analyze the data going forward, and gives you some questions to ask about it from that perspective. So I did a little summary here for you, and I've got that I think makes sense that you should take with you as you move forward. Victims and offenders often reside in the same space. So victims are not victims, and targets they're in the same space. They're there together. Victims and offenders may have similar routine activities. You may be going to the same, the victim may be going to the same place. They live in the same neighborhood. They're going to the same place as the offender. And so there are questions around that can be asked. An offender's awareness space, this is a place they believe they can offend. It includes suitable targets. So who are suitable targets? There are people that a lot of times they're women because they're less strong and don't have the ability to fend off an offender. And so they have an awareness space that needs to be looked at in terms of what you're focusing on. The notion that space is gendered means that there are some places where targets women are permitted to go or often go. And so the fact that the space itself is gendered is another factor that you can look at to determine whether or not there may be crime or crime occurs. The other notion is space is a collection of places. It's not just the discrete location, but it's the space around it, or the space or the areas that interact with that place that become important. The next thing is that guardians are sometimes assigned to places and may have a responsibility to act, not like bystanders. And so the question is, are the guardians that are assigned to places, do they have a responsibility to act? And a lot of times they don't. The people that have the responsibility to act, the police people, community leaders, a lot of times they're not there when something occurs. And the last thing is that Safe City, because of its list of location, contextualization of the location, and the frequency, and just the fact that those things are there, can act as a type of guardian, because it becomes a place that warns people about where to go. It becomes a part of women's safety strategy. Okay, I'm going to check the app before I go over here, or I heard that this has happened, let me check and see, or let me report so that others don't experience. So the next slide is really a case study that I wanted us to talk about, but I think this is a good time for me to take some questions before we kind of dive into this case study. So if there are questions, I can answer them, and maybe I can get somebody to assist me with that, because I can't really see the chat. Any questions out there before I move on? Quiet. Okay. So let's look at this case study. So Shella is a secretary at a private company in Jakarta, and she's furious because she repeatedly faced sexual harassment on buses and trains. It happened at times when the buses and trains were packed with passengers. The situation was used by several men to advance their sexual desires. Not only me, but many women experienced similar treatment. The bus station she had to use did not always have adequate lighting. In the places where passengers wait to take a bus is near a store where many men hang out and drink liquor. When the buses were not as crowded, some of the men would sit in seats so the women would have to sit next to them. Shella said men took advantage of the crowded buses and trains to fondle her and other women's breasts. They sometimes rubbed themselves against women. When they were noticed, they immediately moved away. She said it was a traumatic experience, but had no other choice but to take the bus to the same public transport, take the same public transport so that she could get from her home in Bekasi to West Java to her office in the Indonesian capital on time. I have to take, okay, let me go back, move this out of my way. I have to take public transport because it's cheaper and faster, she said. There are no employees of the bus station or the bus lines near the area where women board the buses. Even the bus driver's seat is enclosed to protect them from passengers. Therefore, the bus driver is not available to help women. So this is a case study that is probably been repeated over and over again in several countries and cities. There was a rape of a woman in a bus on a metro train in California earlier this year. And it's the same kind of thing. It's a public space. Women have to take the transportation, but there are no guardians there. There's no place managers there. And there's also this ability for the people that are traveling there the same time, they see the same people there. It's part of their their crime pattern, that they figure like, well, there's not going to be anybody here to see me. There's not going to be anybody here to hurt me. And so I can just continue to behave in this way. And this is what we see often all the time about what happens in these different places. And so what I had planned to do was ask some questions, because I think if you look at the case study, these questions really help you figure out, these questions are good examples of what questions you can ask in the situations that you're in, about the data that you've gathered and what kind of intervention you can design to affect that. So the first question is, what evidence do you have that the victims and the offenders often reside in the same space? And so that's a good question for you to ask about the data that you're looking at. Are the victims and offenders are they always there? Is this going to be a space where it needs to be looked at differently than just, oh, it's a particular location? What evidence do you have that victims and offenders have the same or similar routines? You know, are the incidents that you're seeing incidents that happen in the same area or based upon the same routines? And these are questions that you may be able to ask further about situations that you're coming across. Why might the offenders believe that their awareness space includes suitable targets and it's okay to engage in offensive behavior? Why might they think that? Is it because there's no guardians there? Is it because there's no other things that are happening there that would allow them to think, okay, there's going to be some victims here and it's going to be okay for me to engage in that behavior? The next question is the space gendered? Are these places where targets women are permitted to go or must go or have to go in order to carry out their daily activities? A lot of times those are locations, transportation that take people from one place to another. Next question is, what guardians assign to the space? Does a bus driver have a responsibility to act? Guardians are sometimes assigned to places and may have a responsibility to act, but what if they're just a bystander? And then from that, what safety strategies do women have in those situations? And then the last question is, how can Safe City be used as a type of guardian for public bus stations or for riding on buses using this particular case study? And so these questions are going to hopefully help you think more broadly about what solution you're going to come up with. And hopefully it gives you some ideas about how the theories of crime are beginning to show that place and space are very critical in understanding and combating crime. So there's a study done called the Pixel Project, and I don't know if my colleagues are aware of it, but anyway, it had 10 recommendations to combat crime, gender-based violence in public spaces. And so I thought I would include it here because I think from the standpoint of what might be done or what you might be thinking about doing, these might be interesting things. And so one of the first things they recommend is pay attention to data and take action. Collecting data, that's what you're doing. You're collecting data. And so that's a real important part of what happens. The next thing is lights, camera, safety, well-lit streets, transparent public spaces. In our research with Safe City, we've seen that be effective over and over and over again, where spaces are lit and it reduces opportunity for people to take advantage. The next one is make transportation accessible. people fear going to transportation because they have to use it because they don't have the money. That inequality means that they earn less, they don't have a car. It needs to be more accessible in certain ways. Another one says, make it affordable. And so we know that if you can't even afford public transportation and you're forced to walk or something like that, you expose yourself to even more areas where there might be problems. The next one, of course, is making it public transportation safe. Looks like I have a couple of those there. Provide support hotlines and reporting. That is, what Safe City is all about. Implement city level anti-violence action against women and initiatives and policies. It's what you're doing, going into communities and getting authorities on board with working on these projects is going to be important. The other thing is something that we have also been doing is training law enforcement, making sure that they understand what these issues are. Even one officer, even if you impact one officer, you can change how women and people that are victims of sexual violence you can change how that happens. And then I think this is one of the most important things, is provide equal opportunities for women to participate in governance. Women can work to protect themselves in this process. It's not that we can't do it. It's that we have to push to get the opportunities to make these changes. I often laugh and say that if men had to have cramps, that they would have figured out a way long time ago for them to be gone and eradicated, and nobody would ever have them anymore. And so I laugh at that. It's just it's the fact that women really do have to make it safe for themselves. And in so doing, they make it safe for everyone. It's got to be our passion to do it for ourselves. And so I think the wrap up is that, there's an evolution of space-based thoughts in research about how we understand crime with respect to place and space. It's important for sexual assault. And it suggests that the offensive strategies of women need to be influenced by a network-based understanding of place-based awareness. So that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It was beautiful. It was really wonderful. I was so excited for this. I was really, really looking forward. From the participants, if you have any questions, any queries, I know you guys have a lot of doubts. You keep shooting them at me. This is the right time. Here is where you go. Ask away. But honestly, the idea and the approach that even Safe City has taken, you have taken, Elsa has in her mind, and she's also working on that. I like the idea of how we're trying to understand space and gender, and at the moment also we see physical spaces getting occupied by men right away. There's an empty lot. The first thing you'll see is a group of men that comes there. Similarly, now that we're moving towards a more overdeveloped world, a techno world, a world where virtual space is another space of study, I see the same pattern being repeated in the cyber world as well. And the same idea of how the cyber world, it's also space, like you said, right? That space is also getting gendered again, and then that space becomes unsafe too. So I like that the theories and the ideas that you shared are actually something that we can apply to so many levels in so many areas: physical world, school, mind, space, virtual world. It's just so interesting. I was taking down notes. I'm really going to study now. It's exciting for me. Elsa, what do you think?
I think that's really interesting, and how you can use data to then influence. First, you have to understand the problem, and then you can influence if you have the data. And for me, I've seen that in our work over and over again. And like Andrea said, even if you are able to influence one person, that's moving the needle, and change takes a lot of time. And especially when you're talking about a global pandemic like sexual violence, it's every day in our homes and in our lives, and it's so normal. But then it's happening.
That is true. We're really looking forward to how students study this data and apply the theories that you have, because without the theories, it's just a lot of data in their hand, and for them to mix match and come up with ideas, come up with resolutions is going to be very difficult. So this will channelize that energy of how to understand this or how to read and interpret it. I think that's where we're going right now with this. I'm very excited. Andrea, we also had another masterclass on storytelling. So we're also trying to understand data, the theories, and then trying to weave a story around it, bring a narrative, try to picture it in a way that it'll be easier for people to understand the data or the theories that we work on. So that's also one more thing that these students are doing. I would really like someone to speak right now, at least share your experience. How do you feel at the moment? Gurpreet, Amrita, you did a good job. Amrita, do you want to speak?
A shy group, huh?
It's a shy group. It's a shy group. What about you, Shrija? Manav, one of our students, Manav, he was collecting data in the last activity, and he made a reel, an Instagram reel or about it, and he put it on Instagram, and then it went around, and so the local radio channel, they picked up on this, and then they've asked him to come and speak about the project that he's doing, the challenge that he's doing. So
That's
again,
wonderful.
it's spreading. People are trying to get involved in, because it's an interesting intersection of study, I feel.
Yeah, and
Yes,
I think that when you start
sorry.
to see the data come in and you have an idea, I think it's important to think back to see what theory it links to, because it does link to a theory. It's
Definitely,
one of the
definitely.
things that we found is that there are people thinking about things, and then there's the practitioners doing it. And so we want to make sure that that gets linked up. And I think that would be a good thing to just ask, the question, so what theory does this link to? Is this, because it helps us study it more effectively if we have that. So yeah.
So if there are no more questions, Vaibhavi, I think they should take a snapshot of the case study and the questions, and then go into the breakout rooms and discuss that.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
I can share my screen back
Yes,
up
please.
again.
Thank you.
And I can send it to you too.
Hmm.
It makes sense if that's easier. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back. Stop sharing. Sometimes this does not like me. Can I just send it to you? Would that be easier for you to do
Yeah,
it there, or?
yeah. No issue. You can put it in
Well,
the chat box if that is
okay, I can do that.
the
I
link.
can do that.
So we can separately open it in our rooms.
Okay. All right. So all of us old school people, it takes us a long time to figure out what we're doing. Okay, so let me grab it. Okay, so I'm having a little bit of computer problem. What's going on here? Let's see. All right, I'm having a meltdown here. Let's try it again. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm gonna have to, I don't know what's going on with my computer. I'm gonna have to share. So here's the case study again.
Mm.
So if you could take a screenshot of that, I'll make it bigger. Well, maybe what is going on here? Oh. Okay, so why won't it do that? Won't do that. Okay, so I'm gonna have to do something different.
Can I suggest something?
Sure.
So
I can't figure out what's going on. It's just like my computer is like locked up. It won't do anything.
it's okay, no issues. So I've made the group, and what I can do is we can just go there and start discussing the case study. And I also have the questions that we could ask on me at the moment, because I took notes. So I can just
Okay.
move around on the groups
Move
and
it
then
on
check
and
with
let-
them.
Yeah, go on and move it, and then I will keep working on. I don't know what's going on with my computer. So.
No issues, no issues. So at least we start a discussion then. 1 second.
Let's go down. Okay. So can you see
Here we
that?
have- Yes. I'll just take
Let
a
me see if
screenshot.
I can make it bigger. Ah! Okay.
No, it's okay.
So
Yeah.
there.
Okay. I'll just open the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Is everybody moving? You can join any room if you want to. Do you want me to assign you a room too? Would you like that?
Yes, you can. You can assign me a room. And the questions are up now.
Taken a screenshot. Amrita, Srijan, you all haven't joined your room yet? Hello. Hi everyone. How are you guys doing?
Oh, fine.
Fine. Ranu, how are you? Did you understand the case?
I'm good, Vaibhavi. No, actually, I'll have to, I think, look at it again.
No issues, I'll tell you. So the case is about a woman who'd go to this office every day and get molested on the bus. So that's the target location, the bus now. So that's what we're trying to study, and we have a set of questions which I will share just a second. Just discuss these, try to figure out how to go about it and what to do with this basically.
Okay.
I will share. Yeah. Just check these photos. These are here. So you can just look at these. Okay. What do you think? What do you think, Chinmay?
About what exactly?
I was just talking the case study.
I'll have to think about it for a few minutes.
Okay. Think, I'll come.
Okay.
Just look at the questions. Go in your chat. First screenshot is case study. And the second is the questions that follow up. How is your work going? At least tell me that. How is the reporting going on?
I got ill, so I didn't do anything for the last 2 days.
Okay. Ranu?
Yeah, actually, I had my presentations, so I also I was also was not able to do much. But yeah, I hope to start in the weekend. I've got some time now.
Okay, no issues. You can do it in the weekend. Try to come up with location. Try to look at the data that is there already. Now that you have an advantage of looking at the data set, look at the data set and then try to come up with something. I'll just go to another room and come back. Cool?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, hello, how's it going?
Everyone is silent till now.
Why? Gurpreet, Manav?
Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about the case study? What do you think about looking at buses as your target location here? What kind of changes would you try to make to a bus in order to make it safer? Do you think? Yeah, tell me.
Maybe we can change. Maybe we can change the whole alternative or
when we're talking about urban spaces and urban planning and its correlation with violence and crimes, we are sort of shifting the onus from the actors that are to be targeted, that is the law enforcement, and how we can reduce crimes generally in the society, how to not make criminals and all. So that's what I was sharing, that we have to always, we cannot, the perspective that we're looking at, we cannot see it in isolation. It has to be looked at in relation to the crime aspect and law enforcement and everything together. Because if it's viewed in isolation, then by shifting the responsibility to other things, we are sort of making a problematic viewpoint. That's what I've shared.
Yeah, I thought that was a very great point. And I was saying to her that, it's important to know that this is to supplement what law enforcement and society is doing, and that, it's made to share with them. I mean, and the goal is to share it with them. But I think her point really critical, is that it is not to, put the onus back on women to save themselves. It is clearly to provide some avenue, some evidence that get us to the table to help those people that we pay and are charged with the responsibility of protecting women, make sure that they're actually doing their responsibility. And I think that I'm glad she made that point, because it just kind of brings it full circle for me. So thank you.
Definitely, Ranu, great work. It resonates in the same manner where we're going at the moment with the challenge, and even if not challenge, like everyday problems that happen. In the second group, there was a beautiful discussion that Astha and Gurpreet came up with. Astha had some concrete points with especially the bus example. And Astha, would you like to share these? Astha?
I just forgot some points. So,
No worries, I'll assist you.
uh,
I wrote it down.
so so we want to make the places we want the female participation more. So if we just like we are getting so there is a problem of harassment in buses or public transport. So that actually eliminates us to use those so we are searching for alternatives, but instead of searching for alternatives, why not claiming it more? If we females claim the buses more, maybe we can make more safe spaces, and at the end it will result into a space where we have our share of what we needed right now, and like it will be not right now. Second thing is that the criminal, the about that he can't be first he will be not he will he will be not hindered, because the person is not going to make the chows every day. The person who is traveling, because every day changes, and the person the same rigor that she to just she want to make a scene out there or something.
Yeah, Astha.
We just harass her.
Yeah, Astha made some really, really amazing points on. I think there's some connectivity problem, Astha, which is why your audio is not very.
I'm reaching out to you from parts of India.
I still can't hear. I'll just reiterate what Astha's point was. She wanted, like she said right now, to claim spaces again, to claim these places again. So she introduced this thing that is there in Delhi, state of India, where you get free transports for women. So that's there. It's only female transport, free transport for women. Then there's she also suggested we could limit the number of people who could occupy this space, putting a limitation. That is something that could be done. Guards or CCTV cameras are indicators of guardians. That could be done. Gurpreet had another good point. Gurpreet, would you want to speak about the civil defense volunteers?
Yes, ma'am, sure. In Delhi, state of India, we have DTC buses here, and in that DTC buses, we have civil defense volunteers. So the volunteers are their job is to like the volunteers are recruited in every single bus, every single DTC bus. So their main aim is to reduce the crime. So, and I believe that somehow at some extent the crime has reduced. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's that notion of guardians. That's exactly what that is. That's putting guardians in whose specific job is to do that. And thank you for that. That's an excellent suggestion, and it goes along with what we're seeing in the literature, that guardians, place managers do make a difference.
That was a beautiful discussion, actually, with a case study also. It gives a lot of perspective when you have person stories, real stories being studied. It just makes a more, it makes a better impact, makes you think also. Because reading data every day could be a little too much for the participants as well, I feel. If you guys have any questions, you can shoot them in the chat box. If not, then we can just conclude the session. Let me know. Even after this, in the process, if you have any questions, if you want some material for further study on theories, Andrea, I will route them to you if they can.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great. I will, and if you send them to me, I will send you an answer and send you whatever data or something that I have to help, because this is a very exciting project, and I'm just so proud of all of the participants and all the work that they're doing.
Thank you so much. It's really great, actually. Thank you for coming. I know you were not in the right condition, and I hope you feel better. But still, thank you so much for coming, irrespective. This means a lot. You know, it is just, and more than anything, we got to learn so much. It's just amazing, and it's just adding to the journey. I think everybody would take this forward, not just for this challenge, but for a longer period of time. You know, whatever you do in life, you realize that these are the elements, these are the basics of going ahead, I think, as a law student or a criminology student.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Alrighty.
Thank you, Agami. Thank you, all the participants. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kamala. Thank you, Rima, for organizing it. I think Etsa had to leave for another meeting. But yeah, she's really grateful to have you for this masterclass as well. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, we can have a round of applause. Yes. Virtual round of applause. Thank you so much.
Okay, and so you send me a note if I can do anything else. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
Okay.
much. It means a lot. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye everyone. Bye. Have a good day.